Chapter 13 of The Rejuvenation of Aunt Mary by Ann Warner. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13. Aunt Mary Entrapped. Aunt Mary's arrival in the city just coincided with the arrival of that day's 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock in early June is very bright daylight. Therefore, she was rather bewildered when the train pulled up in the darkness and electricity of the station's confusion. The change from sunlight to smoke blinded her somewhat, and the view from the car window did not restore her equanimity. When the porter, to whom she had been discreetly recommended by Joshua, came for her bags, she felt woefully distressed and not at all like her usual self.
"Oh, do I have to get out?" she said. "I ain't been in this place for 25 years, and I was to be met."
The porter's grin hovered comfortingly over her head. "You can stay here just as long as you like, ma'am," he yelled in the voice of a train dispatcher. "I'll send your friends in when they inquiahs." Aunt Mary eyed him gratefully and gave him the nickel which she had been carefully holding in her hand for the last hour. Then she looked up and saw Jack. A perfectly splendid Jack, in resplendent attire, handsome, beaming, with a big bouquet of violets in his hand. "For you, Aunt Mary," he said, and dropped them into her lap and hugged her fervently. She clung to him with a cling that forgot the immediate past, disinheriting and all. Oh, she was so glad to see him. The porter approached with a beneficent look. "Has he taken good care of you, Aunt Mary?" Jack asked, as the man gathered up the things and they started to leave the car.
"Yes, indeed,"
Aunt Mary declared. So Jack gave the porter $1. Then they left the train.
"I was so worried," Aunt Mary said as she went along the platform hanging on her nephew's arm. "I thought you'd met with an accident."
"I couldn't get on until the rest got off," he said, gazing down on her with a smile. "But I was on hand all right. My, but it's good to think that you're here, Aunt Mary. Maybe you think that I don't appreciate your taking all this trouble for me, but I do just the same." Aunt Mary smiled all over. Everyone who passed them was smiling too, and that added to the general joy of the atmosphere. Aunt Mary felt proud of Jack, and rejoiced as to herself. Her content with life in general was, for the moment, limitless. She did not stop to dissect the sources of her delight. She was not in a critical mood just then. "Why don't you stick those flowers in your belt, Aunt Mary?" her nephew asked, as they penetrated the worst of the human jungle, and the preservation of the violets appeared to be the main question of the day. "That's what the girls do." His aunt looked vaguely down at herself. She had no belt to stick her violets in. She wore no belt. She wore a basque. A basque is a beltless something that you can't remember, but that females did, once upon a time, cover the upper half of their forms with. Basques buttoned down the front with 10 to 30 buttons, and may be studied at leisure in any good collection of daguerreotypes. Ladies like Aunt Mary were apt to scorn such futilities as waning styles after they pass beyond a certain age, and for that reason there was no place for Jack's violets. "Never mind," he said cheerfully, having followed her dubiousness with his understanding. "Just hang on to them a minute longer and we'll be out of all this." His words came true, and they finally did emerge from the seething mass and found a carriage, the door of which happened to be standing mysteriously open. Within, upon the small seat, some omniscient hands had already deposited Aunt Mary's bags. It did not take long to stow Aunt Mary, face to her luggage, and she was barely established there before her trunk came too, and although the coachman looked so gorgeous, he was nevertheless obliging enough to allow it to couch comfortably at his feet. Then they rolled away. Jack sat sideways and looked at his aunt, holding her hand. His eyes were unfeignedly happy, and his companion matched his eyes. Neither seemed to recollect that one was bitterly angry and that the other was on the verge of melancholia. Instead, Jack declared fervently, "Aunt Mary, I've made up my mind to give you the time of your life." And Aunt Mary drew a sigh of relief in his words and anticipation of their fulfillment. "I'll be happy taking care of you," she said benevolently. "My, but your letter scared me, and yet you look well." He laughed. "It's the knowing you were coming that's done it, Aunt Mary. You ought to have seen me when I got your telegram. I almost turned a somersault." Aunt Mary smiled rapturously and patted his hand. And just then they drew up in front of the house. She looked out and her face fell a trifle. "It's awful high and narrow," she said. "They all are," Jack replied, opening the carriage door and jumping out to receive her. The door at the top of the steps opened, and a man came down for the bags. In the hall above, a pretty maid waited with a welcoming smile. Jack piloted his aunt, first up the entrance steps and then up the staircase within, and led her to the lovely room which had been vacated for her. The maid followed with tea and biscuits, and the man brought the luggage and ranged it unobtrusively in a corner. There was a lavish richness about everything which made Aunt Mary and her trunk appear as gray and insignificant as a pair of mice by contrast, but she didn't feel it, and so she didn't mind it. Jack kissed her tenderly. "Welcome to town, Aunt Mary," he said heartily, "and may you never live to look upon this day as other than the luckiest of your life." Then turning to the servant, he said, "Janice, you see that you do all that money can buy for my aunt." The maid curtsied. She had arranged the tray upon a little table, and the spout of the teapot and the round hole in the middle of the toast cover were each pouring forth a pleasant suggestion. Aunt Mary began at once to haul forth her keys. "Why, Aunt Mary," Jack cried, wondering if her nose was deaf, too, or whether she didn't feel hungry, "don't you see your tea, or don't you want any?" Aunt Mary thumbed her trunk key. "I want a nightgown," she said. "Maybe I'll want something else later, maybe." "You're not going to bed?" She drew herself up. "I guess I can if I want to. I guess I can. There's the bed, and here's me." "Whatever are you saying? It isn't 6:30. "I'm not praying about anything," said the old lady. "I don't pray about things. I do 'em when needful, and when I'm tired I go to bed." "All right, Aunt Mary," with sugary sweetness and lamb-like submissiveness. "I thought we'd dine out together, but if you don't want to, we needn't. And if you feel like it when you waken, we can." "Dine out," said Aunt Mary blankly. "Has the cook left? I never was a great approver o' goin' and eatin' at boarding houses." "Well, never mind," Jack said in a key pitched to rhyme with high C. "I'll leave you now, and we can see about everything later." He kissed her and retired from the room.
"Did he say we're goin' out to dinner?"
Aunt Mary asked when she was left alone with the maid, who hurried to take her bonnet and shawl and get her into juxtaposition with the tea tray as rapidly as possible.
"Yes, ma'am,"
the girl screamed, nodding.
"I don't want to," said the old lady firmly. "Lots of trouble comes through getting out of house habits. I've come here to take care of a sick boy, and not to go gallivantin' round myself. I've seen the evils of gallivantin' a good deal lately, and I don't want to see no more, not here and not nowhere." Then she began to eat and drink and reflect all at the same time. By the way, what's your name?" she asked suddenly. "Jack didn't tell me." "Janice, ma'am." "Granite? What a funny idea to name you that. Did they call you for the tinware or for the rocks?" "I don't know," shrieked Janice, who was busily occupied in unpacking the traveler's trunk. Her new mistress watched her with a critical eye at first, but it became a more or less sleepy eye as the warmth of the tea meandered slowly through its owner. There was a battle within Aunt Mary's brain. She wanted to please Jack, and she was almost dead with sleep. "Do you think that I ought to try and go out with my nephew tonight?" she asked Janice. "If it was me, I should go," cried the maid. "I never was called slow before," Aunt Mary said, bridling. "I'll thank you to remember your place, young woman." Janice explained. "Oh, I didn't hear plainly," said Aunt Mary. "I don't always. Well, go or not go, I've got to sleep first. I'm dreadfully sleepy, and I've always been a great believer in sleepin' when you're sleepy." The fact of the sleepiness was so evident that no attempt was made to gainsay it. Janice brought down a quilt from the closet and tucked her charge up luxuriously on the great bed. 5 minutes later she was in dreamland. Jack came in about 7 and looked at her. "She mustn't be disturbed," he said thoughtfully. "If she wakes up before 10, we'll go out then." She awoke about 9, and when she opened her eyes, the first thing that she saw was Janice sitting nearby. "I feel real good," said Aunt Mary. "I'm so glad," yelled Janice, and smiled too. The old lady sat up. "I believe I could have gone out after all," she said, "only I don't want to take dinner anywhere." Then she paused and reflected. It was surprising how good she felt, and how she did want to make Jack happy. "After all, boys will be boys," she thought tenderly, "and I ain't but 70, so I don't see why I shouldn't go out with him if he wants to. I'm a great believer in doing what you want to. I mean, in doing what other folks want you to. At any rate, I'm a great believer in it sometimes. Today, this time." "Your nephew is waiting," the maid howled. "Shall I tell him you want to go after all?" "Is it late?" the old lady inquired. "Oh dear, no." "Wouldn't you go if you was me?" asked the old lady. Janice smiled. "Indeed, I would." Aunt Mary rose. A flood of metropolitan fever suddenly surged up and around and over and through her. "Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes," she said. "Can you change in that time?" Janice stopped to shriek. "What should I change for?" Aunt Mary demanded in astonishment. "Ain't I all dressed now?" Janice did not attempt to shriek any counter advice, and while she was gone to find Jack, her mistress brushed herself in some places, soaped herself in others, and considered her toilet made. When Janice returned, she caught up a loose lock of hair and put the placket hole of her skirt square in the middle of Aunt Mary's back, and dared go no further. There was an air even about the back of Jack's influential aunt which forbade too much liberty to those dealing with her. End of chapter 13.